Hello, everyone, and welcome to our immigration updates and Q&A session for international students at SFU. My name is Jean Lomas, and I'm an international student advisor, immigration specialist at SFU. I'm joined today by my colleague, Ishani Fernando. Ishani is our inbound exchange program assistant in the International Services for Students office and has kindly agreed to help moderate our discussion today. We're also lucky to have Hannah Lee, who is our international student advisor, programs and settlement, in the room with us. Hannah will be happy to field any medical insurance questions. She's definitely the expert on that topic. For those of you who are attending the live session, you may see Ishani and Hannah sharing resources in the chat box from time to time as well. So before we dive into the presentation, I would like to start by respectfully acknowledging that Simon Fraser University is located on unceded Coast Salish territory, the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Kwikwetlem, and Katzie nations. So just to go over our overall agenda for today, we'll start with an overview of recent updates to Canadian immigration policy as it pertains to international students specifically, as well as restrictions on entry to Canada, which I know many of you have a lot of questions about, which is totally understandable. So this component of the presentation is being recorded. Hello to those who are watching the recording. Nice to see you on our website where this will be posted. We'll then devote the remainder of the session to a question and answer period for those in the live session. On that note, I know you have many questions. We will cover as much as we can during both the presentation as well as the Q&A. As things are always changing, I may not have all the answers, and those that I do have may change, or they might be changing as we speak, which has sometimes happened in the middle of our sessions. So the information we share today is current to the best of my knowledge as of today's date, which for those of you watching the recording is October 8th, 2020. For those who registered for the live session, I'll be sending you an email in the next few days with a list of resources you can refer to, as well as a feedback survey you can complete to tell us what you thought of today's session. And on that note, let's get started. So I thought it might be helpful to start just by giving an overview of the exact topics we'll be covering today, just so that you know what to expect. So we'll go through these one by one. So online learning and your status, any updates on application processing and biometrics, travel restrictions and exemptions, impacts of studying part-time or taking a term off, as well as just a few brief updates regarding medical insurance. So moving on to online learning and your status. And I'm already bouncing around in the slides. So here we go. So just some key points. There have been lots of changes over the past 6 months. Simon Fraser University moved to online learning in March in response to COVID-19, and this has continued for the majority of courses through fall 2020. For spring 2021, the university has announced that most courses will continue to be delivered remotely, with increased in-person courses in program areas that require research and experiential learning. Students in those programs will hear directly from their faculties with ample time to make any arrangements that are necessary. From an immigration standpoint, Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, which I'll be referring to throughout the presentation as IRCC, confirmed early on that the move to online learning will not impact study permit compliance or post-graduation work permit eligibility for students in Canada. For students outside Canada, you may take up to 50% of your program online from outside Canada without impacting your post-graduation work permit eligibility. And in some cases, you can take up to 100% of your program online if you started a program of between 8 and 12 months in length in summer or fall 2020. So this won't apply to most SFU students, but for those who it will apply to, you can always contact us for further details. And just to let you know, the 50% requirement is calculated based on the total number of courses completed in Canada. New students can begin counting the time spent studying online towards their eligibility for a post-graduation work permit, starting from when they apply for a study permit, provided they applied before their program began. Studies outside of Canada through April 30th of 2021 should also not be deducted from your program length when IRCC calculates the length of your work permit, which is great news. Keep in mind that you must hold a valid study permit to study if you are physically in Canada, even if your courses are being offered online due to COVID-19. Moving on to our next topic, which is application processing and biometrics. So COVID-19 has, as many of you are probably already aware from direct experience, continued to disrupt application processing worldwide. And processing times for various applications are often much longer than what's listed on the IRCC website. So delays are to be expected, but if you are in Canada and you were holding a study permit at the time that you applied to extend, just rest assured that you will have implied status, which will allow you to remain in Canada, continue studying, continue working if you're eligible until you receive a decision on the application, even if your study permit expires in the meantime. If you're here in Canada, you have to apply to extend your study permit before it expires. So that was always the case and it has not changed. A few of you submitted questions with your registration, asking if there's a way for you or SFU to help speed up the processing of your application. I wish it was possible, but unfortunately it's not possible to expedite an application. And IRCC won't even consider these requests from either students or institutions. So SFU can't intervene on your behalf to speed things up. It's really just a matter of waiting for a decision or for further instructions from IRCC. On the topic of biometrics collection, as you're aware, it's suspended in many areas of the world, including inside of Canada for temporary residence applications. But study permit, visa, and work permit applicants who are physically in Canada are exempt from providing their biometrics at this time. So by biometrics, just to be clear, referring to giving your fingerprints and your photo as part of your study permit application or extension. For those outside of Canada, deadlines have been extended and your application will not be refused for failure to provide biometrics during this time, nor will it be approved until you provide them if you're outside of Canada. Study permit applicants outside Canada may receive approval in principle if your application was submitted before September 15th of 2020. So this is a new policy implemented by IRCC to allow you to have your application processed in 2 stages. So if you've been deemed to be eligible for a study permit, you may have received approval in principle. However, you may not travel to Canada until you have full approval and travel restrictions have been lifted. So more on travel restrictions in a moment. But just keep in mind that that approval in principle is not the final decision on your study permit application. There's still the second stage to be passed. Information on how to apply for a study permit extension in Canada or for a new study permit from outside of Canada is available on our website. Some of you indicated you have questions about how to apply for documents such as a study permit or study permit extension or a work permit or a visa. So for those questions, I'd recommend starting by reviewing our online instruction guides, which are pretty comprehensive, and then contacting us if you have questions that aren't addressed there. For those of you watching the recording, you may be able to navigate through from the page where you're watching this video to the instruction guides on our website. And for those who are in the live session, I'll include a link to those as part of the follow-up email. I'd also just like to note that if you are a continuing student outside of Canada and your study permit has expired or will expire while you're away, you need to apply for a new study permit from outside Canada. So this is not considered an extension, but instead a new initial application that will be processed at the visa post responsible for your region. We've also received many inquiries from continuing students who are outside Canada and need to apply for a co-op work permit, and are wondering how to navigate that process. Unfortunately, there's no one-size-fits-all answer for this, so I would encourage you to contact us directly, so that we can help you assess your options based on your individual circumstances. And now the moment we've all been waiting for, travel restrictions, hooray. So the most frequently asked question we received in advance of this session was some variation of when can I come to Canada? Or for students who are currently here, if I go back to my home country right now, will I be allowed to return? So again, this is one of those questions where there's no one size fits all answer for this, but I'm pleased to share that there are some upcoming changes that you may have already heard of, that may allow more international students to safely enter or re-enter Canada. On the topic of safety, I also want to encourage you to consider what will be best for you at this time, because the question is not only can you travel to Canada now, but also should you? So what decisions will best support your physical and mental health, as well as your academic success, all of which are critical elements of your well-being? If you're a new student coming to Canada for the first time and you've never lived here before, how will you manage what's going to be a major transition to life in a new country and culture, given that most instruction and services are continuing online at this time? So those are just questions for you to consider as you make your plans. I would also just like to clarify that SFU and the Canadian government are not recalling students to Canada or requiring you to be here. So if your preference is to remain outside of Canada and take online courses at this time, you can certainly do so. So no pressure. But just to go over the current travel restrictions, and that's the ones that are in place today on October 8th, and then we'll move on to the changes. So the current requirements to enter Canada depend on where you're traveling from. So travelers from the United States must demonstrate that their travel is non-discretionary. So that is to say, you must be able to articulate and demonstrate that your physical presence in Canada is necessary at this time. That's really the only requirement, although if you're planning to come into Canada to study, you'll also require a study permit in order to do that. Travelers from other countries need to demonstrate as well that their travel is non-discretionary. So you still need to be able to show that you need to be here for your studies. And you must either hold a valid study permit or an approval letter dated on or before March 18th of 2020. So an approval letter is not a study permit. So if you've received that final approval from outside of Canada, but it was issued after March 18th, as of today's date, you do not meet that exemption. As of October 20th, we'll have to see. The final decision on entry to Canada always rests with an officer at the port of entry, and so we cannot 100% confirm for you whether you'll be allowed to travel. However, if you plan to travel soon and you'd like further advice on the requirements or any recommendations on specific documents to carry, you're welcome to refer to the guidance on our COVID-19 immigration and travel FAQ on our website, as well as contacting us if you have any questions regarding your specific situation. Now on to the October 20th changes. So as you may know, the Canadian government announced some changes last week, which will allow international students to enter as of October 20th if attending an institution identified by the provincial government as having a COVID-19 readiness plan in place. So I'm pleased to share that SFU's COVID-19 readiness plan has been approved by the government of British Columbia. We will provide updates on this as more details become available from the Government of Canada, and students who are currently enrolled this term, so in the fall 2020 term at SFU, will likely receive some email communication about this in the coming days. So you keep an eye on your inbox for that. For now, all the information that we have is contained in the government's announcement, and it's recommended that you wait until a detailed policy is released before finalizing any travel plans. It's possible that we will only have full details on the specific requirements when they come into force on October 20th. So these details tend to be announced, almost right as they come into effect. Until then, we'll do our best to keep all students informed via our website and or by email as appropriate. So it's kind of a to be continued situation, but for now, it looks like fairly good news. You will also be required to quarantine for 14 days upon arrival. And that has not changed and isn't anticipated to be changed with the new exemption on October 20th. So you must make a quarantine plan and submit it to both the federal and provincial governments. On the federal side, that's done through an app called the ArriveCan app. And on the provincial side, there's an online form that you would fill out for the BC provincial government. You can find more information on that in our self-isolation guide, which is located in the COVID-19 section of our International Student Advising and Programs website. And you'll find details of steps to follow, as well as links to both of those platforms. In addition, students planning to travel to Canada should register their travel plans with SFU. So you would have received some email communication about doing this, and you can also find that information in our self-isolation guide. We'll be sharing the link in the follow-up email to that. So registering your plan with SFU will just help SFU better coordinate supports for you during your quarantine period. If you've received final approval of your study permit from outside Canada, you should also complete the Vancouver International Airport, or YVR, expedited processing submission form. That will just help speed up the process of issuing your study permit at the airport upon arrival. So that's just for those who are not already holding a valid study permit but have received their approval for an initial study permit outside Canada. And last but certainly not least on this topic, and I can't emphasize this enough, do not travel to Canada if you do not have study permit approval or a valid study permit, and either a temporary resident visa or ETA if necessary based on your country of citizenship. An approval in principle alone will not be sufficient. So for those who are in Canada right now, many of you have asked if you can take a term off or study part-time in fall and or spring terms. And although there was some flexibility on enrollment requirements to be eligible to work on or off campus earlier in the year, IRCC has not confirmed this for fall or beyond. Therefore, if you are in Canada and wish to work on and or off campus, you must be enrolled full-time. So fall and spring terms are the required terms for undergraduates and year-round for graduate students. The only exception to the full-time requirement for on and off-campus work eligibility is in your final term of studies, where you can remain eligible to work while studying part-time only if you were full-time in all other required terms throughout your degree. So a part-time term in the last term needs to be the exception in terms of your overall enrollment if you want to maintain that work eligibility. Keep in mind that students who are eligible to work off campus are limited to working a maximum of 20 hours per week off campus. This restriction had been temporarily removed for students working in an essential service, but is back in place as of September 1st. So just ensure if you're working off campus that you are adhering to this limit for your off campus work if you are in Canada. Similarly, in order to be eligible for a post-graduation work permit, again, full-time enrollment is required from here on out. If you had a gap earlier in 2020, that's to say you were forced to drop to part-time or take a term off due to COVID-19 in spring or summer of 2020, IRCC has stated their intent to exercise flexibility when it comes to post-graduation work permit eligibility in these cases. You will need to include an explanation and supporting evidence with your application. You can contact us for case-specific advice on how to address periods of part-time study or time off in the context of that application, because often that's one of those very case-specific scenarios. Last but certainly not least, medical insurance, the most exciting topic of them all. And we're very lucky to have Hannah here to address questions at the end of the session. But just for now, for those of you who are located here in British Columbia, the BC Medical Services Plan, or BC MSP, has made some temporary policy changes due to COVID-19, which you can find on their website. Those policy changes include providing coverage to students who are holding implied status in Canada while awaiting a study permit extension. They're also providing coverage for medical services related to suspected or confirmed cases of COVID-19 for individuals in BC who aren't eligible for MSP. On the topic of GuardMe at SFU, which is the temporary insurance plan offered to new students, keep in mind that now only new students in their first term are enrolled in this temporary plan. It's really meant to provide primary insurance coverage during the 3-month waiting period for BC MSP. So continuing students, if you're not in your first term, you're no longer enrolled in GuardMe, and you must apply for MSP if you're in British Columbia to make sure that you have valid medical insurance coverage. Also, just a reminder that new MSP applicants will have their coverage backdated to the date they became eligible for MSP, which is generally 2 or 3 months after you arrived in British Columbia. Backdating will not be extended earlier than September 1st, 2019, but just keep this in mind if you're applying for MSP for the first time, but you've been in BC for a while, as you'll need to pay backdated fees once you enroll. On the topic of secondary medical insurance, which is offered through the Simon Fraser Student Society and the Graduate Student Society, the opt-out period for this, or change of coverage period for this insurance has already passed. Now, for students who are outside of Canada, there will be a retroactive opt-out period in summer 2021 in the event that you're not able to come to Canada and use the plan by that time. You can visit the Student Care website, which is studentcare.ca, for more information on that. So thank you so much for bearing with me through all these updates. If you can believe it, this was the short version of the presentation. And with that, we'll now move on to our question and answer session. I will end the recording in a moment. So for those of you watching after the fact, thank you for watching. If you're viewing this on our website, you should see a link to a feedback survey next to this video. I would encourage you to click through and complete it to tell us what you thought, because we're always trying to tweak and improve these resources. We'll also be offering this session twice more, once on November 9th and again on December 4th. Where you'll be able to find updated or hear updated information from us based on what develops over the next couple of months. So for details, just check out our events and programs page, which you can find in the left-hand menu on our International Advising and Programs website, which you are likely watching this video on if you're watching the recording. But thank you again, and we hope to see you in a future workshop or in one-on-one advising.